So thank you for joining me and coming into the session. Please do feel free to come in and out. My name's Amy, and if you want to follow me online, you can find me at Red Rocks Projects. If you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK, and I know there'll be a few people watching on the live stream today, so hello folks in the UK. If you want to find me on social media and on GitHub at Red Rocks Projects. So before we jump into things today, I want to give you a content warning. And this is really just to give you a trigger notice of the things that we're going to talk about. They are a little bit on the sort of triggering side. So I'm going to talk about depression. I'm going to talk about anxiety. I'm going to talk about self-harm and suicide, and I just want you to be aware of that. If you're not comfortable at any time, my sessions are completely open. I won't call people out for leaving the room. I like people drifting in and out. So please do feel to do whatever you feel comfortable with. So first of all, I'd like to do a little kind of hands up exercise just to find out who's in the room, really. So hands up if you're a manager or a team lead in this room. Okay. Hands up if you're an open source maintainer or you own a repository and people contribute to that. Okay. And hands up if you're a community leader or you volunteer. Great. And hands up if you're none of those things. Ah, phenomenal. This talk is for everybody. These three groups of people are what I've designed some of the content to be for, but honestly, there's takeaways for everybody within this talk. I really just want to help with understanding and giving some context. So let's see what we're going to do today. So this talk is going to give you some context, and that context is going to be about mental health issues and working with people in teams. We're going to provide you with some examples. I'm going to lead you in some personal examples of my own story in working with teams with mental illness, and I'm also going to give you some mindful methods. These methods are practices that I've seen introduced across the board for people with mental health issues. I've seen them really well adopted in companies, and I've also seen them really well developed in communities that I'm part of. And I'm going to offer you some advice on how you can help with other communities and what you do in open source projects. So before we begin, I don't know what everybody in the room knows about mental health statistics. There's a little bit of a wide variation out there. In the US, it's 1 in 5 people live with a diagnosed mental health condition. In the UK, it's 1 in 7. And in the technology industry, and this is kind of the most scary statistic because this is what we're all part of, right? 50% of us are likely to have or be diagnosed with a mental health condition throughout their career life, whether that's just one experience of burnout or a continuous development of issues throughout their cycle of life, jobs, careers, all that pathway. So this is a really important thing to be considering. It's not just like an edge case. These people aren't just 1 or 2 people. They're likely to be half of your team. And it's a really invisible thing. So I'm going to give you some context and give you a little story about my mental health journey. In the year 2000, when I was 10 years old, I had my first instances of suicidal thoughts. At the time, I didn't know how to contextualize them. I felt like an outcast. I felt really misunderstood, and I just thought that they were dark, obsessive thoughts that every kid had. They weren't. In 2002, I had my first instance of self-harm, and that was when I was in secondary school. And being somebody who suffers with mental health illness in a secondary school in the UK, it's not fun. And people actually mocked me for self-harm, which made the situation worse. It took me 10 years to actually reach out to anybody about my mental health conditions because I saw them as a vulnerability. I saw myself as somebody who was weaker than everybody else, who couldn't put up with the stuff that everybody else did day to day. I saw my colleagues and my coworkers and my classmates succeeding, and I just thought I had to just put more effort in and do more and work harder. I started medication at that point, and in 2014, I had my first round of therapy. I saw counselors and cognitive behavioral therapy as well, which we sometimes refer to as CBT. Now, there's a couple of CBTs, but this is the one I'm referring to in my talk. And in 2016, so just last year, I had my second breakdown in my adult life. And that took me to changing my medication. And if any of you here have been on antidepressants or any kind of medication for stabilizing mood, I can tell you it's not fun to make that change. It takes weeks, sometimes even half a year or a year for that change to really impact your life and your day-to-day living. So it's 2017 now. I'm stable. I'm in what I would call a mentally well state. I'm quite extroverted right now, but I am still learning about my condition, and I'm still learning about the things that affect me. In diagnosis, I've had severe anxiety, severe depression. And chances are, actually, I also am on medication that treats obsessive-compulsive disorder, and I found this is very well working for me, so there could be elements of that introduced. One diagnosis is never the same. It changes from day to day, and that's how my life has been. It's been changing ever since I decided to reach out. So when I think about myself in this infinite loop. On one side, you see me, I'm happy, I'm confident, I'm bouncing. This is the person that's talking to you today, actually. Like, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm speaking to this room, and I hope you're all enjoying this as well, and as like bouncing off the walls. There's a couple of dogs here. Have you seen that? That's amazing. So yeah. The other side of me, though, is this person that's anxious, that's depressed, that's paranoid. When you meet this person, you'll know and you won't want to stick around them. I will do everything to push you away. Even if you're my closest friend, a colleague, or a loved one, I will do everything just to be on my own and not have you there, even though that's the one thing I really, really want in that moment. Another thing that I'd like to clear up from my own personal journey is that there's a lot of medication myths. So I'm an audio engineer, so I'm going to talk to you in sine waves. So in this nice wave, we have my happy, bouncy, confident peak. We have my anxious, paranoid, depressed trough. And if you look at this range, we would call it dynamic range in audio. That's the space in which my extreme and my low kind of come together. My medication takes a trajectory off this journey, and it actually just limits things. It limits things in the way that it also reduces my highs as much as it reduces my lows. It doesn't just make me happier. And people think, I make jokes actually because I find it still difficult to talk about mental health, but I make jokes about my happy pills and the things I take to make me smile. It's not true. They're the things I take to make me less anxious, to make me less nervous, to make me less a little bit of everything, actually. And when I first started taking antidepressants, I had to communicate this feeling, and for ages I just said, I feel numb. I don't feel much, actually, but I don't feel sad as much as I used to, so that's good, right? So it takes a while to find the one that works for you. In May of this year, when I was actually experiencing my breakdown, when I was most introverted, I was really frustrated, and I was experiencing difficulty in communicating with teams I was part of. One of my student communities was having a major drama, I would like to say, although I don't like the word drama, to be honest. But I wrote this blog post, and I posted it on Medium, and if you go to that link, you can find it. If you want to take a picture, I'll leave it up for a few seconds. But I wrote it because I wanted to give people an idea of when we should try to share about our mental health experience, when we should try to speak out to people, and when we should really, when it's important. It's not an easy thing to talk about, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but there are some situations where I feel it's really beneficial, and in my personal experience, it has been. So one of the things for me, as I said, I was super introverted. In fact, I was on the cusp of another breakdown when this happened, and I posted it, and these were the responses. People who I barely knew or had only spoken to me a few years ago or had worked with in the past reached out, and they said things like, it was very honest, it was so powerful to read your blog post. My family, in fact my sister shared this one, and she said she was proud of me. She was proud to know that I was reaching out after all the struggles she saw through my teenage years, after all the things that she knew about but perhaps struggled to understand. She was glad that I was speaking out about it. And people who I met at hackathons was just like, oh, it takes some guts to write that, thank you. And friends who were suffering like me said that somebody as accomplished as me suffers like me, so that makes it really, really humbling to know that I can succeed. And that made me feel really great, because when we talk about our mental health, not only do we kind of open that vulnerability, but we help others to open that too, and we can become a role model to speak out and to help our teams and to help developers. So I really want you in this talk today to develop some understanding, to get into this cycle where you then can empathize with people who have mental health conditions, with your coworkers who might be struggling with something or struggling with a family member, and then be an ally. This cycle will just continue to increase. The more you're an ally, the more you help others understand, the more that people will empathize, the more that this becomes a subject that we can talk about wherever we are, whoever we're speaking to, and feel comfortable with, because it should be something we feel comfortable with. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to feel bad for. We shouldn't feel guilty for the things that we experience. The struggle is really real. And I'm going to use an example now that is a real-life example. I've removed all names. It's completely anonymous, but it is a conversation that I had. This was an experience I had this year after sharing my mental health status with somebody I was working with in a team. And the response sent me into a downward spiral, one that I had only just recovered from, actually, and it was another amazing, amazing depressive episode after one that I just recovered from. So this was what was said to me. I said, "Hi, Amy. Mona and I have been reading back through the discussion between you, Mona, and Hubot, and the whole situation left us feeling very anxious. It took a bit of time for us to get our heads around why." I'm like, okay, what do you know about the situation? So this is a person that I didn't disclose my mental health status to. This is a person that's outside of the original conversation between Hubot and Mona and me, and that upsets me, because, I told Hubot and Mona because I know and love them. I didn't tell anybody else because I wasn't comfortable. When they say very anxious, what did I do to make them anxious? Why are you feeling anxious? I'm the one that's opened up here. And then I start to think, did I do the wrong thing? And we continued to discuss the project. This is the next statement within this long paragraph that was sent to me. It was sent over a social media channel, by the way. It wasn't said to me in person. That's another thing that really hurt. We can see it's a project you're very passionate about, and while this has worked in the past, has led to some heated discussions. Well, passionate's one of my trigger words. Don't call me passionate. It means emotional to me. People use them as synonyms lately. You're emotional, you're irrational, you're really passionate. So that's a backhanded compliment to me. Was I really being that defensive in the conversations we had before? Weren't we just debating? I'm really confused. And this is when my anxiety kicks in. I get heart palpitations with my anxiety, and it makes me feel sick. I used to sit at my desk at work and stare out the window and wonder what was happening to my body before I understood that I was actually suffering from an anxious reaction. We're concerned that us getting involved and imposing our way of doing things, even inadvertently, might lead to further disagreements and tensions between us, and we don't want that. Imposing? I thought we were working together. What's imposing about working together? That's a discussion, right? That's collaborative, that's open source. Does this mean I'd have to stick to your rules, or I'm a liability? I don't understand. And you said might. You're kind of suggesting it is going to lead to more arguments, so you're ditching me now? Do I have a choice? How do I voice how I feel? How do I even bother? And then it was finished with this line. We value our friendship with you, and we don't believe it's worth risking over a project. And I was like, really? Am I being unreasonable here? But is it because I told you about my mental health condition? Because before you didn't talk to me like this. And I certainly felt like I won't do that again, because that was really damaging. And why couldn't they just talk to me in person about this? Why couldn't they call me in, have a chat, even a video chat? I know we're all busy, right? We all need our time, but these are the things that really make me struggle when I get these long messages and I've kind of felt like, oh God, and how is it all meant to sound in their head? I have no idea. I couldn't hear the voice or the tone. And then I remembered that Mona copied Hubot into this conversation. And that made me go, oh no, what does Hubot think of me now? How do I look? And I had a good angry cry. So at the end of all that, I got through it because I have personal coping mechanisms. But those conversations might look like simple interactions. Maybe you're trying to deal with a situation. Maybe something's escalated and you're just being direct because you don't have the time to put the emotional content into that email or something like that. But it can be really damaging. For me, I listen to music. So when I'm struggling to socialize, I'll put my headphones on. I'll put something good in my brain because it helps me. I also play piano, and I've been a musician for many years. And when I play piano and write music, that's when I'm having a release moment. So I do those things to help me. When I'm really introverted, I write, I blog, or draw. The blog post I wrote because I was introverted. I didn't know whether I was going to share it or not at the time, and I shared it with a couple of colleagues. I shared it with friends and loved ones, and they said, you should post that. But I was writing it because it was a coping mechanism for me, not because I wanted to put it out there or I wanted to be a spokesperson for anyone. It was for my personal benefit in ways of helping my anxiety. And I also use the CBT techniques, like thought diaries, for assessing situations. And there's plenty of resources online that you can look at for cognitive behavioral therapy. I'll just let you know that most people do a big groan when you hear cognitive behavioral therapy. It works for some people, it doesn't work for others. There is a massive change in what works for you, and you should never try and push like anybody that might disclose a mental illness to you. You shouldn't like say, oh, you should try CBT, it's amazing. They've probably heard it. They've probably heard it before. They've probably done everything. And the other thing that I started doing of recent is when I'm extroverted, like today, I can talk and I can feel comfortable and tell you about my experience, and I hope that helps others. So at the moment, I've started a community interest company called My Kind of Tech. We hope to help businesses and events just be more inclusive, whether that's to do with mental health, diversity, or any other thing. We want to talk to you about what you can do to do those things, and I'm happy to talk to you about that too. I also have worked a lot with women in tech communities, and I work personally with people with complex disabilities. So there's a whole range of things that I have minor expertise, and I'm not going to profess to be knowledgeable in all, but I can help in pointing you in the right direction or making a connection with people. So today I'm going to give you 3 things that I think you should be doing to help your teams. And whether that's just on your repository, whether that's in a workplace, or whether that's just in your community, these are 3 things that I think can really help. I think you should all try and talk more openly. So it's a good practice because it allows transparency, right? But it also allows for empathy. When we talk openly about our personal experiences, we get a better sense of understanding. You can paint a whole picture for people with anxiety and other issues. And you should just to be aware, like you shouldn't enforce this. This should be something that you do as a team in general, and always make sure you keep that space for a private place to talk, an ability to reach out one-on-one, and please don't pressure anybody to be like, oh, you should put this in the general chat, like this is where it should be, this is where it lives, because that can only sort of exacerbate anxiety issues. If you don't want to share it with everybody, that's your prerogative, but the more that you can do and that you feel comfortable doing so, the better it can help with this. Being open also helps create a visibility of mental health. So one of the issues that we have at the moment is that people don't reach out about their issues, and then this whole thing becomes like, oh, I'm this person in this team and I'm hiding, and actually the other person sat next to them going, oh, I'm this person in this team and I'm hiding, and nobody communicates it because it's a fear factor. But the more visible we are, the more people understand, the more people empathize, and the more people feel like there's things in place for me, and it creates role models. And just recently I went to Grace Hopper. There was a really, really nice open panel talk on mental health, and I just went, wow, there's women in this industry who've suffered in similar ways to me, and that makes me feel really good because I feel like I can do it too. And it also helps to raise the awareness within companies and communities as well. So it's always good to talk openly. We should share everything as well. Now, I can hear like this kind of recoil internally from some people, like, share everything, even our private stuff, and the stuff that we're working on is super, super secret. I don't mean that. I mean, like, permission granted. I'm not saying you give responsibility over or even like change the way you work, but you want to just give simple view access, because for someone like me with severe anxiety, it helps me if I can see the bigger picture. It helps me if I can understand, oh, who's working on this, or what's going on here, or somebody makes a comment about something. It doesn't feel like it's happening behind my back if I also know I can look at it any time I want. Most of the time I don't, but if the option's there, it's good, right? And it really helps when there's a building obsessive thought. Being able to see everything clearly disarms that so quickly. Ooh. Did we skip a slide? So if you have the ability to share everything with everyone, like, why aren't you? I know there's barriers in companies, and I appreciate that, and there's barriers in teams. But really, if it doesn't matter who sees what, why are we keeping it from each other, other than for our own needs? It just seems a bit silly to not create this open community. We all work in open source. We all like working in open source. And I think that's a really great thing to do. The last thing I want to talk about is removing ambiguity. So we do this with Emoji. And I put the sparkle heart up there because Joe sat here. That's his favorite emoji. So he's going to take a picture of that. So Joe's the team lead for the campus experts, which I am one of. So yeah. And I just want to give you like one sentence. In the UK, we use the word fine a lot. It can mean it's good, it's bad. It can mean it's really bad. It can mean I don't want to talk about it. It's fine. So sad face plus fine is usually like, oh, it's fine. I'm disappointed, kind of upset. An angry face plus fine is like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And a winky face with fine, I think that's actually fine, you know? I think that's actually what it means. But without these emojis, without this in place, imagine just getting a response. Yeah, fine. Oh my God, I can't do that. You tell me something's fine, I'll be like, what did I do wrong? Are you okay? I'll send you a million messages until you reply to me. Please don't trigger me. Please send me some emoji. Help me contextualize what you're trying to say. And you should extend that to your technical documentation. So tone and emoji is something that we always try and convey in our campus experts documentation. So we always like stick a load of emojis in there. Yeah, we're happy to be at Universe. Yeah, it's in an issue. Yeah, it's here. And this is one of the things that we just always aim for. But if you have technical documentation, even just the wording and changing that, there's a good practice to ask yourself, like, if I remove all of my previous knowledge of this project and I look at this documentation, does it make sense? One of my triggers is when people use simply and basically, because if I read something that says I simply do this and I've wrestled with it for a couple of hours, I'm going to cry and say, I don't want to be in tech anymore. Like, I'm going to run away. And that can send me into a downward spiral for a couple of days. But actually, just having those words, removing it, thinking about what you're actually saying to people, throwing a few emojis in there, like, don't worry, it's hard, winky face. Like, people will get it. They'll see like the lighthearted conversation. It also makes you more accessible. When there's a conversational tone, people don't feel bad about asking you questions. But if it looks too structured, if it looks too corporate, if it looks too polished, then they might be like, oh God, I could never commit to this repo, or I could never submit a pull request, because they just don't want to, because it's such a big barrier and it's such a big anxiety trigger. So as I have mentioned a couple of times, I'm a GitHub campus expert. Now what that means is that I help communities, technical or not, in my campus, which is in the University of Nottingham in the UK. Now, we do these things, and we do them well. And I'm proud to say that, because this actually is what triggered my talk today. This way of working helps me so, so much. And I want to continue doing that forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So We talk openly. We have these as our channels mainly. So Slack, GitHub, Facebook. Actually, the majority of our activity happens on GitHub. We raise issues when we want to talk about something. If the issue gets a little bit too chatty, we then throw it in a Slack channel. If the Slack channel gets too chatty, or people aren't listening, or Joe's struggling to get notifications to everybody, then we throw it in Facebook, because we know students love Facebook. So we kind of just use the communication channels that everybody responds to best. And if we find that notifications aren't working in the Slack channel, we throw a Facebook group up, because we know that that's the thing we want to balance. We want everybody to get the notifications, everybody to feel included, nobody to feel left behind. That's a really great thing. We share everything. We share all the things. So we have a Campus Experts repository. It's open. You can have a look at it. We have like welcome documentation. We have people making pull requests to this all the time. This actually recently went into an open source community where you could do all of the training as a MOOC. So it's like an online course. You can actually submit and do things at your own time, at your own pace, and the lovely Joe and myself and a few others get to review all of that. And there's now hundreds. Hello, people, we're trying as fast as we can. So that's what's happening at the moment, and we really, really believe in this. And we remove ambiguity. Now, we constantly use emoji to convey tone. Recently, we were at Grace Hopper. Joe is keeping in track with us. We're trying to do everything. Me and Kim are just like, don't worry about us. We've just dropped off the FedEx package. Hooray, like job's over. So he knows that we're good. He knows that we're not struggling. If we'd have put like an angry face there, he'd be like, oh God, what happened at the FedEx office? And believe me, we had a few problems with our packages this week. So that's a really good way just to communicate. And you can speak to us here. So we have a huge amount of campus experts here for how many of us there are. And actually, there's 10 of us here that I've got down on this slide. Do come and talk to us about campus experts. Do come and talk to us about the way we work. Come and talk to us about what we do in our campuses. We just want to be there and chat to you and be a friendly face. So please do that. Before I leave you, I'm going to give you some do's and some don'ts. For me, and I've said they're Amy's because it's my personal ones, this doesn't apply to everybody with a mental health condition. I do not speak for everybody because that changes day to day and it's very different and we're all people. You're not the same as the person sitting next to you, so never assume that one rule applies to all when it comes to any condition, any diverse need, any ability. Don't ask people for labels or try to label people. Don't tell me, oh, so you suffer from depression? Well, no, but you're depressed, aren't you? Not right now. Maybe tomorrow, maybe when this is over, maybe when I go home and have some ice cream. But don't assume tone either, and this is both ways. Like, it can be really damaging to react to things based on assumption, and I've done this in the past. I'm a very emotionally driven person. I react very emotionally to people, so, but something really might not be intended in the way you talk, and if you can't hear the person's voice when you read, the chances are you can't assess what they are actually saying because you can't hear their tone. And Joe actually gave me this advice. If you can't assess that, then jump in a call with that person or meet them face to face or just ask, because chances are you've blown something up and you just need to have like a face-to-face chat and be like, oh, that's what you meant. Ah, okay. And it's all fine. And don't share conversations or information without explicit permission. Now, today I shared with you a chat, yes, but I anonymized everything. I made Mona and Hubot the subject, and that's not something that I will ever share who that content came from. I don't believe in that, but I do believe that you shouldn't share when somebody's disclosed something personal to you. I gave you that example because it was good to illustrate all of the triggers that it had for me as an individual, and I hope that you learned something from the way that that tone came across, because you may have read that completely different to me. But yeah, please don't. If somebody tells you something, even if it's to tell your partner, your mother, your father, don't tell them unless they've been given explicit permission to. Do give people the benefit of the doubt. We all have bad days, we all have hard days, we all have good days. Just be patient. Do check your language and encourage others to do so too, especially words that are descriptors. Don't call someone emotional, don't call someone irrational. Don't say, oh, don't be silly. Because even when you're trying to be supportive, these are really hurtful, and calling me silly because I reacted to something, a bit over-dramatic maybe, but I understand that that's maybe over-dramatic for me, and that's my level of over-dramatic, but I understand my capabilities. When you label it like that, it makes me feel like everybody sees it that way, and it makes it hard for me to then feel comfortable in a space again. And when people talk about their mental health, if you use these words, it just can mean that they stop talking to you about it. But if you do know somebody with a mental health condition, and they talk to you, and you've got them on a good day, ask them if they're trigger words. Ask them if there's anything that you might use in conversation that would be best to not use. If you feel like you can do that and you have that level of trust, that's really good to do, because I can happily tell people, don't call me emotional, don't call me irrational, don't call me passionate, don't call me all of these things. But not everybody can. So do ask. And do offer your support as an ally. That leads us into that question. And when you offer support, whether it's joining a community at your work, whether it's seeing whether your work has a mental health policy, or whether sick days also include mental health days, whether it, finding all of that information out and advocating it or promoting it or putting it somewhere public where people can see it is a really good thing to do. Even if you don't have a mental health issue, even if it doesn't apply to you, just be there and be like, hey, look, we have this great thing. Isn't that amazing? That's really nice. We're people. I like that. And I also want to share Amanda's GitHub repo. So Amanda did a workshop yesterday at the workshop day, and she included some really great resources for people. So I'll run through a couple of things that were really prevalent that came out of the workshop. There are several challenges for people in a with mental health conditions in a working environment. One is being a subject of gossip. Two is being alienated or feeling awkward around colleagues. Three is being denied career advances. It's a real thing. If I disclose, are you going to think that I can handle the pressure of this next promotion? Four, you communicate to your team and management. It's not always the easiest thing to do, even if they know that you have a disclosed mental health condition. Five is taking time off for well-being, which leads into six, taking extended time off for well-being. Gosh, I've met so many developers that have gone away for 3 months for an emotional bout of leave or, something to help with their well-being, and they've come back and felt completely out of the game, completely out of odds with the team, and then gone completely introverted and spent most of their time being angry and snapping at people in a corner with headphones on. It's really hard to come back when you feel like you've had time away, especially because you'll feel vulnerable for having that time away for the reason in the first place. And then there's 7, the symptoms that impact workflow and productivity. And sometimes it is real, you're introverted, you don't want to talk to people, and that can stop you from being a productive member of your team. Now on to the better stuff, how you can support. So Amanda had some great suggestions, and I was really glad to catch this workshop yesterday. She suggests that we can normalize conversations about all of the mental health conditions that might be out there. We can make this a thing to talk about. We can be open about our own needs and invite others to do the same. We can stop glamorizing overworking. Oh yeah, you worked on a commit all night. Well done you. I went to sleep and I had a cuddle with my dog and it was great. I don't want to work all the time. I don't think any of you want to work all the time. Some people do have a really high-pressure job and do need to work a lot of hours, but stop making it a thing that we should just all accept as a reality. Encourage taking time off, taking time out of the office for a wellness walk, doing good things with people. And seek out guidance within your company and management about how do we deal with a mental health condition when we have somebody in a disclosed team. What's the company's policy on that? Is it good? Would you like that if that's how you were treated? Evaluate it, give feedback, and work together to find accommodations. These things, we call them, I think they're called reasonable adjustments in the UK, which is a very British term. But make sure that the person you're working with is comfortable with the accommodations that you're suggesting, and you're not just suggesting them for that person, because these are really important things to consider. And if you want to take a picture, Amanda has put loads of resources here There's things like open sourcing mental illness. There's MH prompt. There's all sorts of communities that you can get up to on that repository. And as I said, I went to an amazing session with a few ladies within the tech community on mental health in technology. And that session was almost life-changing for me. I came out of it, I had a good cry. I got to the front of the stage and found that 10 other women in the queue wanting to talk to the ladies there had also had a good cry. And it was really humbling. And I want to say thank you to them for sharing, and thank you to anybody that speaks on this or just opens up, even if it's to a colleague today or whether it's just centering those things within yourself. Feel really positive that these conversations are happening. Because as Grace Hopper said, the most damaging phrase in the language is we've always done it this way. There is time to change, and we should always try to be look for that. Because in open source, together is better. Thank you.